Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here, or Ash Activate Learn on Twitter. It is time for another book review, and this time round I thought I would go back to Ernest Hemingway. After reading A Movable Feast, which I loved, I went out and bought a whole stack of his books and decided to pick up A Farewell to Arms to read his book. So this is a second Ernest Hemingway book that I have read. Now when I picked it up I was thinking, do I really need to read a book that is about World War One, that I was going to read about the horror and the violence of World War One, especially at a time during COVID? Maybe I should have read something a little bit more uplifting. I don't know. But actually I'm glad I did, because A Farewell to Arms is a lot less a war story than it is a love story. So as I was reading this, I thought it was going to be like Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front, which you may have read, and it's a book that we should all read or have on our shelves at one stage. But A Farewell to Arms happens to be a love story that is situated during World War One. So it's situated around war, but it's mainly about the story of young Frederick Henry, who's an American who works for the Italian ambulance service. He gets blasted with a mortar in a trench one day, one night, when he and his troops are eating spaghetti, and he gets his knee blasted. He's wounded, but in the process, he saves a mate of his, where he's also up for a bravery medal. But when he's in hospital, he falls in love with Catherine Barclay, an English nurse, and from there the story goes on. It's a story more about the story about their love, but also what kind of situation he's put under during a very stressful time in war. So during the war, bits of the book, what I read was how the Italian soldiers really didn't want anything to do with war. They didn't care about it. They wanted to go back home. They wanted to continue their lives. They were quite ambivalent about it. There was a lot of talk about how boring it was and how they just wanted to desert. They would say, what if we just put down our arms, if we just dropped our weapons and not participate, there wouldn't be a war. And so you could see the angst, the anxiety, the pressure of the situation of these men who were going crazy with regards to not wanting to be there. And so at the same time, though, while this romance was happening with Catherine, we also got to see another side of Henry, which was a lot softer. So this book, A Farewell to Arms, when I thought, well, what does a farewell to arms mean? Does it mean you just kind of set aside the guns and the weapons of war because you really don't want anything to do with it? Or is it a farewell to arms, a farewell to um, your lover's arms, so to speak? And maybe that is also something that came out with the book. I don't want to actually spoil it. So the themes of the book, as I was reading this, was more about the futility of war, but it's inevitable when you've got stupid people making decisions for the rest of others who are just kind of flung into this situation and don't really want to be there. There's also the story of desertion. There's also the story of wanting to escape that boring, horrible, violent situation in war, to go back to some kind of level of normality, which is usually what the female provided. So what Catherine provided was a bit of normality for Henry. The romance itself was really interesting as I was reading it. It's not like a romantic novel that you would normally read. The way Ernest Hemingway writes, it's quite short, sharp, and succinct. He's not a man of many words. He's certainly not a man who provides flowery language and evocative prose about the landscape. If anything, the sentences are short, every word is measured, there's not many adjectives describing a place, and yet you kind of put yourself in there. He somehow evokes that situation simply from just a few sentences. And you could just, I imagined Hemingway reading this and actually just kind of deleting a lot of words, like an editor, a proofreader. You don't need that, you don't need that, you don't need this adjective, bang, 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 bang. But I love the way he writes. and I will read a lot more. So, Farewell to Arms is really about saying goodbye to obviously your beloved, but also saying goodbye to war because it doesn't serve your need. Um, it's a book about black and white. So there's horror and there's violence, but at the same time there's also love and romance. Um, it's a very masculine book, but at the same time we see the feminine side. So, you know, Henry's quite a male kind of guy, but when he's with Catherine, he softens up. And at the same time, Catherine, being the female, being the soft, at times I thought she was also quite tough. So she was masculine in her own way. So what happens though is he gets Catherine pregnant, and this was really another eye opener because at the time this would have been a no in the situation. But she doesn't seem compelled to get married. She kind of, it is what it is. She plays along with it, and she's totally fine. And the way they interact with each other is actually quite lovely, and yet at times formal, but at times not formal. I can't really describe it. It's an interesting dynamic. Um, so there were points in the book where I just went, oh, it was as if someone had just punched me here, where it took my breath away because of what had happened. It was very unlike one situation. I'm not going to spoil the story. Was very unlike what I thought Henry would have done. Um, and at the same time, the ending just went, no. Don't you like it when books do that to you? So, A Farewell to Arms, look, it is more of a love story than a war story. Comes highly recommended. I definitely recommend it. If you have read this book, let me know what you think, because this is also one that should be in our libraries, I reckon. But it's very, very different to All Quiet on the Western Front if you were expecting something similar. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. So let me know what you think about this book. Happy reading. Bye for now.